George Kilpatrick, Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people we feel good about. The 100 Black men in Syracuse, among many other groups in the community, is concerned about education, as we all are. If you've been in Syracuse in the last few weeks, you have seen many things that we should be concerned about, especially around how our children are comporting themselves. I guess that's another issue for another time. But the fact of the matter is we need to have a conversation about education and what we need from each one of us, whether it's those of us who have a microphone and a platform, those of us who are experts in the field, like our guests we're going to speak with. But we are going to have a conversation over the next few minutes, which is the first of a couple of conversations which will prelude to an event that'll be happening in about a month from now at the Bethany Baptist Church, looking at not only education, but also how does it tie into the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how our children are showing up and how we're showing up for them. Vincent Love is I want to keep saying you're the president, but you ain't no more. He's past president of one of the organizing founders of the 100 Black Men of Syracuse, past president. Pleased to be joined by Vince. Also joining us is Dr. Bernard Gassaway, ALG Consulting. He is here. He's our expert. He's going to give us some things that we need to know about. And of course, we met this brother before, Errol. Errol Bedford is the president of Higher Learning Network, and he is helping the 100 Black men in their charter school efforts. So all of that on the table today. Gentlemen, let me say welcome to Inspiration for the Nation. Vince, why are we here?
Well, we're here to, first of all, inform the community about some of the things that are going on with regards to education of our students here in this area and actually statewide. Mm-hmm. And secondly, we want to give the community some ways or possible solutions, things that they can support in terms of us providing resources here to our students in Syracuse, New York.
And Dr. Gassaway, you and your expertise have really taken a look at a number of issues statewide. What's your concern?
My concern is the lack of involvement on the part of our people, our parents, our community activists, and really being on the front line, making their voices heard. Because when our voices aren't heard, the other voices are heard, and those voices usually don't include us, in their mission and vision, for education. So that's a major concern for me at this time.
It's interesting you talk about our voices being heard, Errol, because, well, they're gonna be mad at me, but we talk a good game as a community. Now, I hear people, we need to be over here and we need to be doing this. And I'm like, well, then if that's the case, what's going on?
Well, I think that that's the main reason why Higher Learning Network was formed. Mm-hmm. We're a group of educators with vast experience and a lot of success when it comes to educating our children, despite the lack of resources. Higher Learning Network was born out of a project, an education project out of the South Bronx, a poor neighborhood, one of the poorest in the United States, a school that lacked resources, a charter school. And through the efforts of the principal, his administrative team, and members of Higher Learning Network, we were able to turn that school around. And we used that as our laboratory for success. So after a 7-year stint of continued success, we thought it was apropos that we would try to partner with communities that were interested in trying to overcome the ills that afflict our students presently.
Yeah, and Dr. Gassaway, look, you not only talk about it, you write a lot of books about it. Like, these are you've come up with some really practical ways for us as a community to be involved with our students. I guess let me give you a perception that I have, and then you can help me with this.
Okay.
And Errol, you can jump in here too because you know what I'm saying. So, like I said, this week we've seen a couple of instances. Well, here's what I'm describing. Not in some of our buildings, a lot of people. There's a lot of kids are fighting,
Mhm.
and we're seeing a lot of that coming out of the pandemic. And it when you think when you ask them why, it's like it just seems to be right now something that's a little bit out of control. Now, either I'm maybe that's a perception that I have, I don't know. But you're seeing this happen in some of our schools. And you at the same time you hear some of the activists in the community asking for certain things of the schools and asking for certain things from the administration. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, we need all of those things, but what do we do with these kinds of situations that are happening right here, right now?
Right. Yeah. I think what you're describing is probably happening around the country, particularly in our communities. But the interesting part for me, from my perspective, is that these things were happening prior to the pandemic. So I
Mm,
don't like the way lay it all on the pandemic.
right.
One of the things that the pandemic has exacerbated the current conditions that are going on, because even in New York City, there's shootings, teens are dying at each other's guns and things of that nature. But I would argue, and this goes back to what we talked about before we got on air, as relates to the diversity, equity, and inclusion framework,
Mhm.
because the one thing that's probably missing in many of these schools is really the application or the practices, what we would call equitable practices.
Mm,
And at the center of equity is student voice, right? So I would wonder whether or not the students feel as if they're being heard, because they're actually acting out for many reasons. And one of them, they don't feel at home. I would also wonder, what does the staff not only look like, but how does the staff behave? Are the staff people of color? Are the staff men of color that can relate to the students who come from the same place they come from? That's the diversity piece, right? In terms of that. The inclusion is, are they included in any type of activities whatsoever when it comes to the planning of what's going on in the school? People in general won't destroy what they help to build.
mm.
And I can guarantee you that if we were to talk to these young people, we would hear them saying that we're not respected, we're not trusted, no one listens to us. So I think all these things feed into the manifestation of the behaviors that we're seeing now. That's sort of like a global perspective, but I believe that's the case at this point.
What do you say, Errol?
Well, and to piggyback on what Dr. Gassaway said, I believe also, and this is a key component for what we tried to strive for this coming year coming out of the pandemic, is the social emotional learning component. So we are very much advocating for a professional development program for instructors, for teachers, that relate to the social emotional needs of our students. And, we've been really drumming that in since August with our professional development programs in the various schools that we have been involved with. And we found that has been helpful so far, but there's a long way to go. And just to piggyback again off of what you had mentioned before, George, about the communities that talk about it, but don't walk the talk. So that's what higher learning is about. We go to the communities and we really see, well, are you serious about what you are talking about? And so one thing that we're very happy about is the relationship with the 100 Black men of Syracuse, because they are actually, walking the talk. So, and there's other organizations that we have been involved with throughout the state who have, similar ambitions, but there are many others who talk but don't do the walk. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned we were talking with Dr. Bernard Gassaway, ALG Consulting, Errol Bedford. Errol Bedford is the president of Higher Learning Network, and Vincent Love with the 100 Black Men of Syracuse. Vincent, so you want to have this conversation in Syracuse, and you want to bring some community stakeholders together. What do you want to see happen? Now, we have an event coming up. Third week in November sometime?
Yes, around November 20th.
November 20th. And so in order for that event to have some impact, or for the community to see some results, or to have their voices heard, what do you think needs to happen?
Well, one of the things that needs to happen, and that's why, first of all, we're hoping for a large turnout. We want people from the community to show up to this event as an opportunity to gain some knowledge, to get some information, some of the specifics, as Dr. Gassaway was talking about the conditions of the educational system as it currently exists and where some improvements need to be made. That's the first part. The second part is that we want to be able to offer them then some possible solutions or areas where they can actually get involved, where it's a matter of them not sitting back and talking about, well, this needs to be done and that needs to be done, or as we've been doing for many, many years, turning to someone else to find solutions to help our students. At some point in time, we feel like it's time for us to take responsibility. And even if we don't have the capacity to handle, the thousands of students that are here in Syracuse, we can still provide resources that can be an option for even just a small group that eventually, if we can touch the small group, if we can change their thinking, if we can provide services and an educational platform for them to be successful, then others will see that and hopefully model what we're doing that works. And then that whole solution can spread throughout this particular area. Because one of the things, like Dr. Gassaway mentioned, many of the problems, the obstacles, the challenges that we have here in Syracuse are happening across the country.
Mm-hmm. They're not
But
unique.
the other thing that's significant about that is that what is happening across the country that's not happening here in Syracuse is that in some places there are educational institutions that have been established by, managed by, and operated by people of color. Mm-hmm. We don't have that here in Syracuse. Haven't had it since Grace Academy, which you're probably familiar with, George. And so it's time for us, to start taking responsibility for educating our own. And that's where the 100 has had this vision for years, and we're continuing to work towards a vision of establishing an educational institution where we take responsibility for educating our students and stop turning to other people to handle that challenge.
Yeah, I know you and Errol were working on that. Where do we stand with the charter school?
Well, at this particular time, we're fine-tuning our application process, but a major component of the application process is engaging the community. So we really are in the process of continuing our efforts to let the community know of our potential project and gather that support, and let the community know that this is an opportunity for us to take responsibility for educating our children. Mm-hmm. Okay, and stop passing the buck, because we when we depend on others, we've seen what the results have been for decades, if not longer. So now we have this opportunity to address that issue for ourselves, and let's go and let's do this and help our children.
Right. Yeah. Can I jump in?
Please jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say that if not now, it's like when, right? Because in the state of New York, we currently have the three top people: the governor, the speaker of the assembly, the majority leader. Two are Black, Carl Hastie and Andrea Stewart Cousins. They are the custodians, the head custodians over education in the state of New York. And then when you come down one rung, in the Board of Regents, the chancellor is a Black man, Dr. Lester Young Jr. And then I think for the first time is that the Board of Regents, there are 17 members of the Board of Regents. And if I'm not mistaken, this is the first time where I believe 9 of them are people of color, which would make that the majority in terms of the board. And then on top of that, our education commissioner is a Latina, Dr. Betty Rosa. So we have all this so-called Black power, people in position power. So what I would suggest, one thing is that these people in power know that Syracuse is on the map, and that Syracuse want to work and move forward in this way. And so even if they were to get 100 letters, the Board of Regents, for example, if they were to get 100 letters from the community of Syracuse, that would put you on the map. And that would even get these people to come and say, well, what are your interests? What's going on? We want to be present because we now know that you are awakened.
Well, when you say 100 letters, what do you, I want to dive into that a little bit.
Yes.
The community needs to do what? Because this activism around regents and contacting the regents, what's that about?
So here's what happens. So the Board of Regents, like any other entity, they respond to the public, but they respond to the public that makes the most, I'll say, noise, for example, squeaky wheel, right?
Right.
And so when they're creating these policies, they put the policies out, such as diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then you have a small group of white folk, to keep it real, who would voice their opposition to it. That small number of white folk are so loud that they then get to shape the policy or the direction of the Board of Regents. So I know from firsthand that the Board of Regents, some members of the Board of Regents are saying, where is the community? Where are certain people of color who are being disproportionately impacted by these policies? Where are they making their voices heard? It's as simple as saying, I support the diversity, equity, inclusion framework, and we would like to see that in our district. Because right now, I'm telling you, they don't get letters, even like, it's a brief letter, it's not no long letter.
Well,
yes, sir.
No, you go ahead, because now that you've mentioned that, if you say I support the diversity, equity, inclusion, and framework in my district, then I have to know that thing exists.
Exactly. So it is available. It's available online, right? But see, that's the work that now we on the ground must do. But it could be a very simple process, because when we break it down in terms of for our listeners, diversity simply means that the workplaces that are now majority Caucasian, that serve majority children of color, we need to change the workforce. It needs to reflect more of us. That's what diversity really is. And then inclusion means that when you're deciding these programs and you're bringing all these consultants into your building, you're bringing in these reading programs into your building, what literature are the children actually reading? Are they reading literature that reflects them? Probably not. And so therefore they're not included. And then equity, whenever you speak about equity, you say, and I spoke to a group of students just 2 days ago. I said, what does equity mean to you? And they said, well, it means to be equal. And that's not quite right? Because equity really means, it's really focused on more about fairness and giving the people who need more, and those who need less, giving them less. And so these are the simple concepts that we can break down to our community and say, what is missing right now? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. What do we want more of? Diversity, equity, inclusion.
So George, when Dr. Gassaway is talking about the 100 letters, he's talking about that voice. He's talking about, and that's part of the reason for this event on November 20th, is to, first of all, inform the community so that they understand what it is they need to ask for. They need to know what's available to them.
Hold on, Vince. What is the event? When is the event? What time is the event?
The event is going to be and we're calling it an educational summit for 2021. It's a conversation about education in Syracuse, New York. It's going to be held at Bethany Church at 149 Beatty Street. Hours would be from 11 a.m. until about 1 o'clock p.m. And it's an opportunity for individuals from the community to come hear information that's provided, like people like Dr. Gassaway, Errol, Bedford, just to inform the community about what's available to them, what resources they need to tap into in order to improve the educational circumstances in Syracuse for their children and their students, and that they don't have to just sit back and take whatever is handed their way. they have some options.
All right, listen, more to come. Part one, second conversation a little bit later on. Dr. Bernard Gassaway, Gassaway ALG consultant. Listen, brother's got a lot of books. Get those books and improve your community. And,
Thank you.
you know, Errol, I like you because aren't you from the Bronx?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, you know, we good.
Yeah, right. Absolutely, George. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's my hometown. And Vince, of course, Vincent Love, the 100 Black Men in Syracuse. Al Bedford with the High Learning Network. Vincent Love with the 100 Black Men in Syracuse. Look for the date. We'll keep you posted. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in Syracuse is what we need, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is what we want. And we can demand that, and we can make that happen. So that conversation about equity and education in Syracuse, November 20th, from 11 to 1, Bethany Baptist Church, 149 Beatty Street in Syracuse. We will keep you posted. All right, GK, Inspiration for the Nation. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, George.
Thank you so much.